The bullet had missed his heart by 2 inches. Nam Kijun found that darkly amusing. He wasn't sure he still had one to miss. At 36, he'd survived 12 assassination attempts, 3 gang wars, and 1 childhood fire that had taken his entire family and half his face. Seoul's underworld called him the Burned King, the half-faced devil whose scars ended negotiations faster than bullets. Power built empires. Fear kept them standing, but neither kept you warm at night. For 20 years, women touched him only in darkness and looked away in daylight. Soldiers would die for him but couldn't meet his eyes. He had accepted the brutal truth: monsters didn't get love stories. Then Dr. Tara Johnson saved his life at 2 a.m. on a blood-soaked Tuesday. When he woke up drugged, shaking, and broken, he grabbed her hand and called her mother to him and cried for the first time since the night his family burned. She didn't pull away, she didn't flinch at his scars. She looked at the most dangerous man in Seoul like he was simply a patient in pain. That was the moment Nam Kijun realized this woman was going to save him, or destroy him. Maybe both, because 3 weeks later, his enemies kidnapped her, and Kijun learned that having a heart again meant having something worth bleeding for. Before we go deeper, if you're enjoying powerful stories like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, but it means everything to this channel. If you keep watching without subscribing, you're quietly telling YouTube this story doesn't deserve to be shared. And I know that's not what you mean. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let's continue. I stared at the man who'd put a knife to my throat 3 weeks ago, the man who'd built an empire on fear, and watched his eyelids flutter open in that hospital bed. The anesthesia was still thick in his system. You could see it in the way his pupils struggled to focus, the way his fingers twitched against the white sheets like he was trying to grab onto reality itself. The doctors had warned me he'd be confused when he woke up. What they didn't warn me about was the word that would slip from his lips. My breath caught mother. He called me mother. Kijun's voice cracked on that single word, raw and desperate. And suddenly the most dangerous man I'd ever known looked like a lost little boy searching for someone who'd probably never coming back. His hand reached toward me, not with the calculated precision I'd seen him use to orchestrate violence, but with the trembling uncertainty of a child afraid of being abandoned again. I should have stepped back. Every survival instinct I had screamed at me to remember who this man was. This was Kijun, the crime lord, the monster, the man whose enemies disappeared into the Han River and whose name made grown men's voices drop to whispers. But I couldn't move. "Yama, please," he whispered, and his eyes were filling with tears. "Don't leave me again. I'll be good this time. I promise I'll be good." The machines around us beeped their steady rhythm, but all I could hear was the desperation in his voice. All I could see was the way his jaw trembled, fighting against emotions that the anesthesia had unlocked from whatever steel cage he'd built around them. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to be extracting information, not watching a grown man unravel into the frightened child he'd probably been before the world taught him that love was a weapon and trust was a death sentence. "I'm here," I heard myself say, and I hated how my voice shook. I'm not going anywhere." His fingers found mine, gripped them with surprising gentleness. "You said that before. You always say that before you leave." Who was he seeing when he looked at me? What ghost was I standing in for? I'd read his file, the parts that existed anyway. And Kijun's past was a black hole that even our best investigators couldn't penetrate. We knew he'd risen from nothing, that he'd been a ghost before he was a king. But this broken, pleading voice, this was the truth underneath the legend. "How old are you, Kijun?" I asked softly, testing. 7. The answer came without hesitation. "I'm 7, and I waited at the station like you said. I waited for 3 days, Yama. Where were you?" My throat tightened. 3 days. A 7-year-old boy waiting at a train station for a mother who never came. I could see it so clearly it hurt. The small figure sitting on a bench watching every woman who passed, hope dying a little more with each stranger's face. "I was scared," he continued, and a single tear slipped down his cheek. "The men with the suits came. They said you weren't coming back. They said you sold me. Did you sell me, Amma? Was I not worth keeping?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Was I not worth keeping? That's where it started then. That's where the monster was born. In the heartbreak of a child who learned too young that he was disposable. I wanted to pull my hand away. I wanted to remember the atrocities I knew this man had committed, the lives he'd destroyed, the empire of suffering he'd built. But looking at him now, I could only see the architecture of trauma, the blueprint of how an abandoned boy becomes a man who trusts nothing and controls everything. "You're safe now," I whispered, knowing it was a lie, knowing everything about this moment was wrong. His grip tightened. "Promise?" "Promise you won't leave while I'm sleeping?" The anesthesia was pulling him back under. I could see his eyes struggling to stay open, his breathing deepening. In seconds, he'd be unconscious again, and when he woke up, he'd be Kijun, the untouchable, Kijun, the merciless. But right now, he was just a terrified child who needed to hear a lie. "I promise." His eyes closed, his breathing steadied, and as I stood there with my hand still caught in his, I realized with cold, creeping horror that I'd just made a promise to a monster. Or maybe to the boy who'd been turned into one. Either way, when he woke up and remembered this moment, one of us wasn't walking out of this room alive. I started noticing him everywhere. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Lagos isn't that big, right? We probably just lived in the same neighborhood. Worked similar hours, shopped at the same places, but then it happened again and again. The hospital cafeteria, 7:15 a.m., my usual coffee run before rounds. I'm standing in line, half asleep, when I feel it. That prickle on the back of my neck. I turn around and there he is. Kijun. 2 people behind me. Smiling that same soft smile from the clinic. "Dr. Tara, he says, like we're old friends. Fancy seeing you here." My stomach does this weird flip. Part of me wants to be polite. The other part whispers, "This is strange." "Do you work here?" I ask. "Oh no, just visiting a friend." He doesn't say who, doesn't explain which ward, just stands there holding his empty tray, watching me with those dark, steady eyes. I grab my coffee and leave faster than I should. 3 days later, the farmer's market, Sunday morning. I'm picking through mangoes when I hear, "You like the yellow ones, don't you?" I freeze. Kijun, standing beside me, holding a basket of tomatoes. What? My voice cracks. "The mangoes, you always go for the ripest ones. I noticed last time." Last time, I'd never seen him here before. Had I? He laughs, soft and easy. "I come here every week. Guess we have similar taste." I want to say something sharp. Something that draws a line. But I don't. Because what if I'm overreacting? What if I'm being paranoid? So I smile, tight, uncomfortable, and walk away. But my hands are shaking. That night, I can't sleep. I keep replaying it, the cafeteria, the market, his voice. I noticed last time. How many times had he noticed me? 2 weeks pass. I convince myself I'm being ridiculous. He's just friendly, a little awkward maybe, but harmless. Then it's 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I'm exhausted, still in scrubs, stopping at the 24-hour shop near my flat for milk and bread. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. The cashier's half asleep. And then I see him. Kijun, aisle 3, staring at a shelf of instant noodles like he's studying for an exam. My heart stops. This isn't coincidence, not anymore. He looks up, our eyes meet, and for half a second, just half a second, I see something flicker across his face. Not surprise, not embarrassment, satisfaction, like he'd been waiting for me to notice. "Dr. Tara." His voice is calm. Too calm. "Late shift?" I don't answer. I grab my things, pay, and leave without looking back. But as I walk to my car, I feel it again. That prickle, that weight. I glance over my shoulder. He's standing in the shop doorway, watching me. Not moving, just watching. I drive home with my doors locked and my rearview mirror checked every 10 seconds. When I get inside, I pull the curtain shut, sit on my couch, stare at the wall, and that's when I realize he knows my schedule. He knows where I shop, where I eat, where I go when I'm exhausted and vulnerable and alone. He knows me. I pull out my phone. My fingers hover over my colleague in chem's number. I should call her, tell her, but tell her what? That a patient smiled at me too many times, that I've seen him in public places? She'd think I'm paranoid. Hell, maybe I am, but then my phone buzzes. A text. Unknown number. "You left your scarf at the shop. I kept it safe for you." My blood turns to ice. I didn't bring a scarf tonight. I never bring a scarf. Another buzz. "I'll bring it by tomorrow." "I know where you live." The steam from the tteokbokki curls between them like a question Tara hasn't asked yet, but she will. Kijun can feel it coming the way you feel rain before it falls. It's 3 a.m., and the street vendor's fluorescent light buzzes overhead, casting shadows that make her look both younger and older at the same time. She's still in her scrubs, 12-hour shift at the hospital, maybe longer. He knows her schedule better than she thinks he does, better than he should. She spears a rice cake with her wooden skewer, blows on it, and that's when her eyes catch on his hands. The scars. They always do, eventually. "How'd you get those?" she asks, and it's so casual, so gentle, like she's asking about the weather. Kijun freezes. His chopsticks hover over the bowl. 15 years. 15 years of people asking, and 15 years of him perfecting the art of deflection. Kitchen accident, stupid mistake when I was young, nothing interesting. He's got a dozen lies, polished smooth as river stones. But something about the way Tara's looking at him, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with this quiet recognition like she knows what it's like to carry something that burns, makes the lies stick in his throat. "A fire," he says, and his voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. "When I was 17. She doesn't gasp, doesn't lean back, just nods, takes a bite of tteokbokki, waits, and somehow that permission, that space she's giving him, cracks something open inside his chest. "My family," so he continues, and he can't believe he's saying this, can't believe the words are actually leaving his mouth. "My mom, my dad, my little sister Hannah. She was 9. The vendor flips fish cakes on the grill behind them. A taxi rumbles past. The world keeps moving, but Kijun feels like he's standing still in that moment, in that burning house, smoke filling his lungs. "I was at a friend's place," he says. Studying for exams. That's what I told them, anyway. I was actually just being a stupid teenager, angry at my dad about something I can't even remember now, stayed out to prove a point." He laughs, but it sounds like breaking glass. Electrical fire started in the kitchen around 2 a.m., faulty wiring in a building that should have been condemned years before. Tara's hand moves across the small plastic table. She doesn't touch him, but her fingers rest close enough that he can feel the heat of her skin. "Neighbors said my mom tried to get Hannah out through the window. But Hannah wouldn't leave without her stuffed rabbit. Can you imagine?" His voice cracks. 9 years old, and she went back for a toy. "She was 9, Tara says softly, as she was a baby." And those 4 words, "she was a baby," undo him completely. Because nobody's ever said that before. Everyone always said how tragic, how awful, what a terrible accident, but nobody ever acknowledged that Hannah was just a little girl who loved her rabbit and trusted that her parents would keep her safe. "I got there as the fire trucks did," Kijun continues, and now that he's started, he can't stop. It's all pouring out like blood from a wound that never properly healed. "Ran toward the building. Firefighters held me back. I fought them, screamed their names. My mom's name was Unji, my dad was Daishim, and Hana..." He stops, can't say it. Hasn't said her name out loud since the funeral. "Hana," Tara whispers like she's saying a prayer. "Hana," he repeats, and it tastes like smoke and grief and 15 years of silence. I don't talk about them. I don't say their names. If I don't say them, maybe it's not... Maybe I can pretend, that it didn't happen, Tara finishes. "That it wasn't my fault," he corrects. Her eyes widen slightly. "Kijun, you weren't even there." "Exactly." His hands curl into fists on the table, the scarred skin stretching tight. "I wasn't there. I was angry and selfish, and I wasn't there." The vendor calls out to a drunk customer stumbling past. A cat yowls in an alley. Tara's looking at him like she can see straight through to the burning house he carries inside his chest. "Is that why you follow me?" she asks quietly. The world stops spinning. His blood turns to ice. She knows. The blood won't stop. Kijun presses his palm against the gash on his ribs, leaning against the brick wall outside the convenience store where Tara's shift just ended. He told himself he'd just watch her walk home safely, that's all. But the 3 men who'd cornered him in the alley 20 minutes ago had other plans, and now his white shirt is blooming red and she's going to see, and he needs to leave, needs to disappear before... Oh my God. Too late. Tara's standing 3 feet away, her nurse's bag sliding off her shoulder, eyes locked on the crimson seeping through his fingers. And here's the thing about Tara that Kijun's learned over 2 months of shadows and stolen glances. She doesn't ask questions first, she acts. "Come on." Her hand closes around his wrist, firm and warm. My place is 2 blocks. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your hand, Kijun. Move. He's never heard his name sound like that before. Like it matters, like he matters. Her apartment is smaller than his closet back in Seoul, a studio with a kitchenette, a bed pushed against the window, plants everywhere, succulents on the sill, a trailing pothos above the sink, herbs in mismatched mugs. It smells like jasmine tea and something he can't name, something that makes his chest hurt in a way that has nothing to do with the knife wound. Shirt off, sit. She's already pulling supplies from under the sink, gauze, antiseptic, butterfly bandages, professional, efficient. Kijun peels the ruined fabric away and watches her face, watches for the moment she sees the rest of it. The patchwork of scar tissue covering his left shoulder, all crawling up his neck, the shiny twisted skin that never quite healed right. But Tara doesn't flinch, doesn't stare. She just wets a clean cloth and starts cleaning the fresh wound with hands so gentle he almost forgets how to breathe. This isn't from tonight, she says quietly, fingertips ghosting over the old scars. Not a question, an invitation. Kijun swallows. He's spent 15 years building walls, and this woman is dismantling them with nothing but soft hands and softer eyes. Fire, he whispers. I was 12. She pauses, cloth hovering, waiting. My family... The words stick in his throat like broken glass. My parents, my little sister, Hana, she was 7. His voice cracks on her name. God, when was the last time he said her name out loud? House fire, electrical, middle of the night. Tara's hands still completely now. How? But she doesn't let go. She's touching the scars like they're precious things, like they're proof he survived something that should have killed him. I got out through my window, they didn't. The apartment is so quiet he can hear her heartbeat, or maybe that's his own, hammering against his ribs. I dream about it, he continues, and he doesn't know why he's telling her this, why 15 years of silence is breaking open in this tiny plant-filled room. Every night, I dream I make it to their rooms, I dream I save them, and every morning I wake up and remember I didn't. A tear hits his knee. He didn't realize he was crying. Kijun. Tara's voice is barely a whisper. She cups his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. Her eyes are swimming. You were 12 years old. I should have... You were a child. The way she says it, like she's absolving him of something he's carried so long he forgot it wasn't his to carry, breaks something loose in his chest. He's shaking now, and she's pulling him close, careful of his wounds, and he's never been held like this. Like he's not broken, like he's not the monster who's been following her for months because she smiled at him once and he didn't know what to do with kindness. They stay like that until his breathing steadies, until the tears stop, until he realizes her shirt is damp from his face and he should apologize, but the words won't come. Stay tonight, Tara says, into his hair. Please. Just stay. And Kijun, who's never stayed anywhere, who's made a life of running and hiding and watching from the shadows, nods against her shoulder. He doesn't see her reach for her phone on the counter, doesn't see the screen light up with a message thread, doesn't see the name at the top, Dr. Chen, patient transfer request, or the photo attached, his photo. The fluorescent lights in the parking garage flickered twice before going dark. Tara didn't notice. She was too busy fumbling with her keys, exhausted from a double shift, her mind still replaying the way Kijun had smiled at her that morning over coffee. That small, broken smile that made her chest ache. She didn't hear the van until it was too late. The hand clamped over her mouth tasted like leather and cigarettes. Her keys clattered to the concrete as they dragged her backward, her sneakers squeaking uselessly against the ground. She tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat, muffled and desperate. The van door slammed shut, and suddenly she was moving, the world tilting sideways as someone zip-tied her wrists behind her back. Don't hurt her yet, a voice said in Korean. Calm, almost bored. He needs to see her intact first. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Who were these people? What did they want? And then the worst thought of all crashed through her panic, Kijun. They'd said he needs to see her. This was about him. Everything was about him. The surveillance footage had been grainy but clear enough. Kijun's hand on the small of Tara's back as they left the convenience store, the way he'd tucked her hair behind her ear at the farmer's market, his fingers lingering just a second too long. 14 separate encounters over 3 weeks, each one captured by cameras he didn't know existed, watched by eyes he'd spent 15 years trying to avoid. The Choi family didn't forgive. They didn't forget, and they certainly didn't tolerate loose ends, falling in love with American nurses. They didn't blindfold her. That's what scared her most. When kidnappers let you see their faces, it means they don't plan on letting you talk about it later. The man across from her in the van had kind eyes, the sort of eyes that belonged to someone's grandfather. He smiled at her like he was sorry, like he wished things were different. "You seem like a nice girl," he said in perfect English. "Kijun has good taste, always did, even as a boy." Tara's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, sweetheart." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and his smile widened. "Lying won't help you now. We've been watching you both, every coffee, every conversation, that sweet little moment 3 nights ago when he told you about the fire." He tilted his head. "When he cried for the first time in 15 years and you held his hand across that table." Her stomach dropped. How did they know that? How did they know any of this? "Here's what's going to happen," the man continued, his voice still gentle, still grandfatherly. "We're going to keep you comfortable. Fed. Unharmed. You're going to call Kijun. We'll tell you exactly what to say, and he's going to come for you. Because that's what men like him do when they fall in love. They think they can save people." "He hasn't done anything wrong," Tara whispered, hating how her voice shook. The man laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was sad. Pitying. "Child, Kijun's very existence is wrong. He was supposed to die in that fire with his family. The Schwa paid good money to make sure of it, but he survived. He ran, and now..." He spread his hands like he was explaining something obvious to a slow student. "Now he's broken the only rule that mattered. He let someone see him. He let someone in." The van stopped. Tara's breath caught as the doors opened and she saw where they'd brought her. An old warehouse, the kind that looked abandoned from the outside but hummed with generators inside. The kind of place people disappeared into and never came out of. They walked her through a steel door into a room that was almost cozy. A bed, a small table, a chair, a camera mounted in the corner, its red light blinking like a predator's eye. "Make yourself comfortable," the grandfather said, untying her wrists with careful, practiced movements. "Kijun will see the first video in about an hour. After that..." He paused at the door, his smile fading into something darker. "After that, it all depends on how fast he decides you're worth dying for." The door locked with a sound like a gunshot, and Tara realized with crystalline, horrifying clarity, this wasn't a kidnapping, this was bait. The first scream came through his laptop at 4:47 a.m. Kijun's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. The sound, raw, animal, hers, punched through 15 years of carefully constructed walls like they were made of paper. On the screen, Tara's face filled the frame, eyes wide with terror, duct tape ripped fresh from her mouth. Behind her, concrete walls, fluorescent lights, no windows, no clues. "You have 12 hours, a distorted voice announced. "Oh, Sector 9, all of it, or we start with her fingers." He'd built an empire on cold calculation, on never flinching, on treating human life like chess pieces. But watching Tara's chest heave with panic, seeing that exact spot on her collarbone where he'd traced his thumb just 6 hours ago, God, had it only been 6 hours? Something in him cracked clean open. He surrendered Sector 9 in 4 hours. They took her pinky finger anyway. The second day, they wanted his weapons cache in Busan, 3 shipping containers of firearms he'd spent 7 years acquiring. His second-in-command, Jin, stood in his office doorway watching him type coordinates into an encrypted message. "Boss, that's our insurance policy. Without those guns, send them the location. They're going to kill her either way. You know that." "This is basic." Kijun's gun cleared the holster so fast, Jin didn't have time to blink. "I didn't ask for tactical analysis. I asked you to send the fucking coordinates." Jin's face went white. In 12 years, Kijun had never once raised his voice, never once lost control. "You're choosing her over everything we built?" The live stream refreshed in the background. Tara's face, swollen now, left eye purpled shut. Dried blood on her split lip. She was trying so hard not to cry, trying to be brave. And Kijun could see it, that thing he'd recognized in her from the very first accidental encounter at the hospital cafeteria. That stubborn, beautiful refusal to break, the same thing his sister had. "Send the coordinates." By day 3, they owned 40% of his territory. His men were deserting in waves, not because they were disloyal, but because even criminals understand suicide when they see it. Kijun sat alone in his office, the live stream playing on a loop, watching Tara's breathing get shallower. They'd stopped feeding her, stopped giving her water. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The distorted voice came through again. Final offer. You come to us, alone, unarmed. We get you. She goes free. It was the oldest trick in the book, the most obvious trap. They'd kill him the second he walked through that door and keep Tara anyway. Or worse, kill her right in front of him just to watch his face. Every instinct he'd honed since he was 16 years old screamed, "Don't be stupid. There's always another play, always another angle." But Tara's eyes found the camera, and even through the swelling, even through the exhaustion, he saw her mouth 2 words. Don't come. She knew. Somehow, she knew what they'd asked for. His phone buzzed, a location pin, an abandoned factory in Incheon, 47 minutes away. Kijun stood up, checked his empty shoulder holster one last time, and grabbed his keys. Behind him, Jin's voice. "This is insane. You're walking into an execution." "I know." "Then why?" He stopped in the doorway, hand on the frame. For 3 days, he'd been asking himself the same question. Why her? Why this woman he'd stalked like prey, studied like a target, obsessed over like a ghost? Why was he willing to burn his entire empire, everything he'd bled for, killed for, sold his soul for, just to buy her one more breath? The answer sat in his chest like a blade. Because 15 years ago, he'd hidden in a closet while his family burned. He'd saved himself and lost everyone. And he'd spent every single day since then making sure he'd never care enough about anyone to feel that helpless again. Until her. He walked out without another word, leaving the live stream playing on his empty desk. On screen, Tara's head dropped forward, the camera zoomed in close, and in the reflection of her dilated pupil, just for a frame, just for a breath, a second silhouette moved behind the first. She wasn't alone in that room. The first scream came through his laptop at 4:47 a.m. Kijun's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. The sound, raw, animal, hers, punched through 15 years of carefully constructed walls like they were made of paper. On the screen, Tara's face filled the frame, eyes wide with terror, duct tape ripped fresh from her mouth. Behind her, concrete walls, fluorescent lights, no windows, no clues. "You have 12 hours, a distorted voice announced. Sector 9, all of it, or we start with her fingers." He'd built an empire on cold calculation, on never flinching, on treating human life like chess pieces. But watching Tara's chest heave with panic, seeing that exact spot on her collarbone where he'd traced his thumb just 6 hours ago, God, had it only been 6 hours? Something in him cracked clean open. He surrendered Sector 9 in 4 hours. They took her pinky finger anyway. The second day, they wanted his weapons cache in Busan. 3 shipping containers of firearms he'd spent 7 years acquiring. His second-in-command, Jin, stood in his office doorway watching him type coordinates into an encrypted message. "Boss, that's our insurance policy. Without those guns, send them the location. They're going to kill her either way. You know that. This is basic." Kijun's gun cleared the holster so fast, Jin didn't have time to blink. "I didn't ask for tactical analysis. I asked you to send the fucking coordinates." Jin's face went white. In 12 years, Kijun had never once raised his voice, never once lost control. "You're choosing her over everything we built?" The live stream refreshed in the background. Tara's face, swollen now, left eye purpled shut, dried blood on her split lip. She was trying so hard not to cry, trying to be brave, and Kijun could see it, that thing he'd recognized in her from the very first accidental encounter at the hospital cafeteria, that stubborn, beautiful refusal to break, the same thing his sister had. Send the coordinates. By day 3, and they owned 40% of his territory, his men were deserting in waves, not because they were disloyal, but because even criminals understand suicide when they see it. Kijun sat alone in his office, the live stream playing on a loop, watching Tara's breathing get shallower. They'd stopped feeding her, stopped giving her water. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The distorted voice came through again. "Final offer. You come to us, alone, unarmed. We get you. She goes free." It was the oldest trick in the book, the most obvious trap. They'd kill him the second he walked through that door and keep Tara anyway. Or worse, kill her right in front of him just to watch his face. Every instinct he'd honed since he was 16 years old screamed, "Don't be stupid. There's always another play, always another angle." But Tara's eyes found the camera. And even through the swelling, even through the exhaustion, he saw her mouth 2 words, "Don't come." She knew. Somehow she knew what they had asked for. His phone buzzed, a location pin, an abandoned factory in Incheon, 47 minutes away. Kijun stood up, checked his empty shoulder holster one last time, and grabbed his keys. Behind him, Jin's voice. This is insane. You're walking into an execution. I know. Then why? He stopped in the doorway, hand on the frame. For 3 days, he'd been asking himself the same question. Why her? Why this woman he'd stalked like prey, studied like a target, obsessed over like a ghost? Why was he willing to burn his entire empire, everything he'd bled for, killed for, sold his soul for, just to buy her one more breath? The answer sat in his chest like a blade. Because 15 years ago, he'd hidden in a closet while his family burned, he'd saved himself and lost everyone, and he'd spent every single day since then making sure he'd never care enough about anyone to feel that helpless again. Until her. He walked out without another word, leaving the live stream playing on his empty desk. On screen, Tara's head dropped forward, the camera zoomed in close, and in the reflection of her dilated pupil, just for a frame, just for a breath, a second silhouette moved behind the first. She wasn't alone in that room. The morphine made everything soft around the edges, but Kijun's voice cut through like broken glass. You should have let me die in that warehouse. Tara's laugh was wet, painful. The tube in her side made breathing feel like swallowing knives, but she turned her head on the pillow anyway, and meeting his eyes across the 3 feet of sterile hospital air between their beds. Shut up, Kijun. I'm serious. Like his hand, the one that wasn't cuffed to the bed rail, reached toward her, fingers stretching across the impossible distance. I destroyed everything, your career, your safety, your life. She stared at those fingers, at the fresh burns wrapping his forearm like accusations. At the 4th line, pumping antibiotics into veins that had carried obsession for so long it had become blood itself. You think I didn't know? His hand froze mid-air. That day at the farmer's market. Tara's voice was barely a whisper, but it filled the room like smoke. You grabbed the same apples I touched. Stood exactly where you could see my hands. I'm a nurse, Kijun. I notice things, patterns, repetition. She paused, let him absorb it. The cafeteria. Saw the convenience store at 2 a.m. when I worked doubles. You think I believed in that many coincidences? The monitor beside his bed started beeping faster. Panic or hope, she couldn't tell which. Then why? His voice cracked. Why did you let me keep coming? Because. Tara closed her eyes, felt the hot sting behind her lids. Because you looked at me like I was the only real thing in your world, because when you told me about the fire, about your family, you said their names for the first time in 15 years, because you were broken in all the same places I was, and I... She stopped. The truth was too big, too complicated, too insane to fit into words that made sense. Say it. Kijun's whisper was desperate now, his fingers still reaching. Please. I loved you anyway. The confession dropped between them like a stone into deep water. I knew what you were becoming, and I loved you anyway. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before something breaks completely. Kijun's cuffed hand jerked against the rail, metal rattling. I followed you for 8 months, Tara. I learned your schedule, your favorite foods, the route you took home. I stood outside your apartment building and watched your shadow move behind the curtains. His breath hitched. I would have burned down the entire world if it meant keeping you. I know. You don't understand. He was crying now, silent tears tracking down hollow cheeks. When Marcus had that knife to your throat, when I saw the blood, I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I wasn't thinking about consequences. I was thinking about how the world didn't deserve to exist if you weren't in it. Tara's own tears came then, hot and inevitable, because she did understand. God help her, she understood perfectly. The fire wasn't an accident, was it? What you did to Marcus wasn't self-defense. His silence was an answer. Tell me the truth, Kijun. Her voice steadied, turned surgical. All of it. What really happened in that warehouse before the police arrived? The machines beeped between them, his heart, her oxygen, the mechanical proof they were both still alive despite every reason they shouldn't be. Kijun's eyes met hers, and in them she saw everything. The obsession, the violence, the desperation, the love that had twisted into something beautiful and terrible and completely irredeemable. If I tell you, he said slowly, you'll never look at me the same way again. I'm already looking at you, Tara whispered back. I've been looking at you this whole time, so tell me, what did you do? His mouth opened. The confession was right there, forming on his lips. The door burst open. 2 police officers, one holding handcuffs, the other reading from a document. Kijun Park, you're under arrest for— Wait. Tara's voice rang out, clear and commanding despite the pain. I need to make a statement first. The detective's eyebrows rose. Ms. Chen, you're not required to— I know what I'm required to do. Her eyes never left Kijun's face. And I know exactly what I'm about to say. The steam rises from the tteokbokki cart like ghosts in the sodium light, and Tara's eating with her fingers, sauce staining her knuckles red. It's 3 a.m., and the street's empty except for them and the Ajuma who's pretending not to listen. Kijun watches Tara lick her thumb, and something in his chest cracks open, because she's not afraid of him. She should be. After weeks of his shadow falling across her life, after all those carefully orchestrated accidents that weren't accidents at all, she's sitting here like they're old friends, like he hasn't been the monster lurking at the edges of her world. Your hands, Tara says suddenly, nodding at the way he's holding his chopsticks, awkward, compensating. The scars, I noticed them at the market last week. You were buying persimmons. Of course she noticed. She's a nurse. She sees what people hide. Kijun sets down the chopsticks. His fingers, the left hand worse than the right, are a roadmap of melted skin, shiny and tight where the flames ate deepest. He never talks about this. Never. In 15 years, he's kept their names locked behind his teeth like swallowing them whole might bring them back. But Tara's looking at him with those eyes that have seen too much suffering to flinch at his, and the words come up like vomit. There was a fire, he says, voice flat, dead. I was 12. She doesn't reach for his hand, doesn't do that thing people do, that pitying touch that makes you feel like a kicked dog. She just waits, and somehow that's worse because it means he has to keep talking. My mother, Seo-yeon, she worked nights at a factory. My father, Jin-ho, he drove a taxi. Long shifts. I had a little sister. His throat closes around her name. He forces it out. Minji. She was 7. She loved those cheap plastic hair clips. The ones that light up. Had a whole collection. The Ajuma's not even pretending to work anymore. She's frozen, ladle in hand. I was supposed to be watching her, but I snuck out. There was this girl, stupid teenage thing. I wanted to impress her at the PC bang down the street. He laughs, and it sounds like breaking glass. I was gone maybe 2 hours. The wiring in our building was old. Landlord never fixed anything. It started in the walls. Tara's gone completely still. By the time I got back, the 3rd floor was gone. Just He makes a gesture like smoke dissolving. I ran in. The stairwell was already burning, but I didn't care. I found Minji in our room, hiding under the bed like we used to do during thunderstorms. I pulled her out, but the doorframe, it collapsed. Burning wood, right across my hands. He stares at the scars like they belong to someone else. I held on to her anyway, got her to the window. Firemen were there by then. They took her from me. She survived? Tara's voice is barely a whisper. She died in the ambulance, smoke inhalation. My parents, they never made it out of the master bedroom. Carbon monoxide got them first. They say it's painless. I don't know if that's true or just something people tell themselves. The street is so quiet, Kijun can hear his own heartbeat, that traitor organ that kept beating when theirs didn't. I said their names, he says, and he's shaking now, imperceptibly, the tremor of a man holding a building on his shoulders. Seo-yeon, Jin-ho, Minji, first time in 15 years. Tara finally moves, not to touch him, she's smarter than that. She pushes her tteokbokki toward him, the universal language of you need this more than I do. Why me, she asks, why have you been following me? And there it is, she knows, of course she knows. Kijun looks at her, this woman who smells like hospital disinfectant and saves people for a living, and he thinks about how he's been watching her laugh with strangers, watching her choose the ripest fruit, watching her live a life so full of light it hurts. Because, he says slowly, you look at broken things like they might still be worth saving. Tara's eyes go wide, not with fear, but with something else, something that looks dangerously like understanding, and then her phone buzzes. She glances at the screen and her face drains white. That's the hospital, she breathes. My sister, she's in the ER. She's already running before Kijun can process, and he's chasing her, always chasing, but this time she knows he's there. This time maybe she wants him to follow. You know what this story teaches us? Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest guilt are the ones who tried the hardest to save someone. Kijun spent 15 years punishing himself for being a 12-year-old kid, for making one mistake that cost him everything. But here's the truth, grief doesn't have an expiration date, and healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means finally saying their names out loud. It means letting someone see your scars and not running when they don't look away. And Tara, she saw a broken man and didn't try to fix him. She just sat with him at 3 a.m. and shared her tteokbokki. That's the kind of quiet compassion that changes everything. But what happens now? Tara's sister is in the ER, and Kijun's about to walk into that hospital, into Tara's real world for the first time. Will his dark past collide with her present, and what exactly has he been running from all these years besides his own memories? Thank you for watching. If this story grabbed you, hit that like button and subscribe, because part 2 is going to shatter everything you think you know about these two. See you in the next video.